Hello, this is Dr. Eric Bricker with AHealthcareZ, and this is episode 3 of the How to Sell in Healthcare podcast, where we will go over phone prospecting, we will go over initial email follow-up to phone prospecting, we will go over initial phone call, a 5-minute phone call and initial 30-minute phone call, and with the subsequent follow-up after those 30-minute phone calls. So to start off, let's briefly summarize episode 2, where we talked about the email prospecting that we were doing and how we were going to interchange email prospecting with phone prospecting. And so phone prospecting is almost invariably going to take the form of leaving voicemails, because when you call, you're almost nobody ever picks up the phone. I would say, 1 in 20 people will pick up the phone. So there's no reason to ever feel nervous about talking to anybody. In the beginning, I told our salespeople if they were nervous about calling people, I gave them permission to hang up on anybody if somebody actually answered the phone. So I wanted to completely take away the fear of dialing people. And of course, over time, they increased their confidence. But the point is that you're going to call and you're going to leave voicemails. And on that voicemail, there's a few things you need to do. You need to state your name and state your phone number. And then your message needs to be very short, 15, 20 seconds. And then you state your name and your phone number again. And the reason that you state your name and your phone number at the beginning is so when the person listens to your voicemail, they're going to be like, I don't know this guy. And then they're going to listen to your voicemail and they're going to be like, oh, well, that actually sounds kind of interesting. And then when you leave your name and your phone number at the end, they're going to be like, oh, I didn't have a pen, or I wasn't able to write that down. So when they go back and listen to your voicemail again, your name and phone number are at the very beginning, so that they don't have to listen to the entire voicemail again in order to get to your name and phone number at the end. So that's why you leave in your name and phone number at the beginning and your name and phone number at the end. Now, when you do that, you're going to reference the emails that you have previously sent them. And specifically, you're going to reference the most recent email that you sent. Now, I would often even tell them, hey, sometimes I would call on the same day that I left the email, or I would call the day after, and I would reference that specific email. And I would say to them that they could just reply to that email if that was easier for them. So if anything, your voicemail is really just sort of a mini advertisement for the email that you sent. And your voicemail is going to stand out because nobody voicemails anymore. So that is a route to connect with that person that is oftentimes less cluttered, because people are just not using it the way they use email inboxes. You have to envision that the people's email inboxes that you're emailing to, they literally have hundreds, if not more likely thousands of unread emails. So for you to think that they're going to actually read your email, it's actually pretty low chance. And I would say that if you don't get a reply within 24 hours, maybe 48, you're done. So some people will email in a week. And believe me, after 2 days of not replying to you, they are not going to all of a sudden randomly 5 days later see your email and reply to you. That is likely not going to happen, which is why you're going to need to. We would do 12 follow-ups. And on every one of those emails, we would say, our address, and we could say how they could, reply back to us. We're not trying to bother anybody. If they don't want to receive our emails anymore, that's totally fine. But we would do a total of 12 follow-ups, and it would be 7 or 8 emails with about 5 phone calls. So, and that was spread out over probably, let's just say, 6 weeks. So we're doing more than one a week, maybe even 4 weeks, depending upon how it is. And then after we did that initial sort of barrage of 4 to 6 weeks, then we would put them more on a drip campaign, and we'll talk about drip campaigns later. But when you want to initially get a hold of them, then you want to do 12 touches with them. And remember, every one of those touches needs to be documented in your CRM. And I'll briefly go on a tangent. And that is, when we looked at our sales team, it was small. It was only 5-6 people. But when we looked at our sales team, there was absolutely a correlation between sales activity and sales volume, how much they actually sold. And the people that actually hustled and made phone calls and did emails, they absolutely got more sales. So, there's the famous adage, 90% of sales is showing up, right? Well, when you're calling and when you're emailing, like, you're just showing up. You have to interrupt them. And there's no other secret than that repetitious work on the prospecting side. Now, we did eventually get to the point where we had separate, and this is a big Aaron Ross thing, is where you have separate dedicated prospectors separate from your salespeople, because in general, salespeople hate to prospect. And because they hate it, they don't do it. Now, some salespeople are good at it. I actually like it. I actually like prospecting as much as any other part of the sales cycle. I think it's fun. I think it's like playing detective, trying to, figure out, how to find somebody, try to hunt them down. So I actually derive joy from it, but a lot of salespeople don't like it. They just want to have their leads handed to them on a silver platter. And so we separated out we actually had a prospecting team of 3 people that did the emails and the voicemails. And once they actually got them on the phone for an initial, and the offer for all these things, remember, it's just a 5-minute phone call. And once we had a 5-minute phone call, and after the end of that phone call, if they were like interested, they're like, yes, I would like to learn more about this, then it was only after that 5-minute phone call that we would then pass off those leads to the actual salespeople for the more in-depth 30-minute call, in-person meeting, yada, yada, yada. So when your sales team is very small, it's all going to be just like one person or 2 people that are doing both prospecting and sales activity. Aaron Ross says that as soon as you have like 2, maybe 3 salespeople, you're going to want to have one specialized in just prospecting. And those people that are doing prospecting, they typically will have a different skill set and a different level of experience than your salespeople as well, especially because healthcare is typically business-to-business sales, and you don't want your much more expensive salespeople prospecting when you can have a different, and obviously you're going to compensate your prospecting people based upon the leads that they generate as opposed to like sales revenue that they're closing. So your metrics for their variable compensation are also going to change as well. And we had a lot of success with that. The salespeople did much better at the selling, and the prospecting people did much better at the prospecting, and the volume of prospecting activities was also much greater, and the volume of sales activities further down on the pipeline were also much greater, because what would happen is that as soon as a salesperson would get their calendar full of these longer 30-minute meetings and in-person meetings and longer, presentations, then they would stop prospecting. And so what would happen is they would burn through their meetings, and then they would have no meetings left because they hadn't spent any time prospecting. So they'd have to whipsaw back to the prospecting, and then they would have no meetings for another several weeks while they were just doing prospecting. And so that whipsawing back and forth, prospecting and then doing the sales stuff, and then prospecting and doing the sales, it's very inefficient. What you want to have the prospecting people doing is prospecting full time and then constantly handing leads down to the salespeople. The other thing that the prospecting people doing is they were constantly cleaning up the list as well, right? Because people are quitting, people are getting hired. You need to add new people. You need to change email addresses. You need to change places of work. They might still stay with the same agency, but they move from one city to another. So that, we would always go through quote unquote Salesforce cleanup. And after going through quote unquote Salesforce cleanup a couple of times, then actually it was the CEO of our company was like, look, it's like cleaning your house. Like you're never going to be done with Salesforce cleanup. You're constantly going to have to be doing it. And he was absolutely right, is that we had to shift our mentality from thinking that it was just a one-time cleanup of Salesforce to understanding that it was really just sort of a constant process that we had to go through. Okay, so fine. So you do all these things, and again, your call to action is always, hey, I just want to talk to you on the phone for 5 minutes, and you're going to set up a time for that. All right. And so you set up the time, and eventually with the calls, again, 1 out of 20, you're going to actually have that, 5-minute call with them. You never want to have more than 5 minutes. You're never going to like cold call somebody and have a 30-minute conversation. You're just going to do 5 minutes. Now, if you do get through to somebody, again, this is an Aaron Ross thing that I have a little bit of a twist on. Somebody actually does pick up the phone, then you say, hey, this is Joe from XYZ company. Did I catch you at an okay time? Before you do anything else, before you run, you get into, blah, blah, blah. Aaron Ross's question was, did I catch you at a bad time? And I don't like that. I like is, is now an okay time for you, because that way, if they answer in the affirmative, yes, that means it's an okay time to talk. Whereas with Aaron Ross's question, if it's an okay time to talk, then they have to say no, it's not a bad time, which means it's okay to talk. So it's a little, the classic thing in sales, right, is you don't want your prospects saying no, you want them saying yes. So so did I catch it in an okay time? And if they say yes, then I would have a 30-second pre-prepared pitch. This is not some sort of, and this gets into the 5-minute conversation as well. This is how you're going to start off the 5-minute conversation. Even if you have a planned 5-minute call, you're going to say, hey, this is Eric from such and such. Did I catch it at an okay time? Yes. And then you launch into 30 seconds. Maybe I'll give you a minute of specifically the value proposition of whatever it is that you're selling. Okay, this is not I'm going to do some sort of consultative sale, asking you questions and probing. Like, the person doesn't know you. They're not going to tell you anything about yourself. And you have to immediately add value to them within 30 seconds to a minute. So in other words, you have to pretty much already understand the problem that they're having. You're not going to probe for pain on this call. You're going to have already done your research that you already know what type of pain they're going to have, and your solution is going to address that pain. And you're going to, again, talk for 30 seconds to 1 minute. And then you're going to pause, and you're going to say, okay, now I'm going to pause here. And I would oftentimes just say, does that make sense? And you can maybe say, do you have any questions? But again, after talking for 30 seconds, what are they going to say? They're going to say, no, they don't have any questions. So again, you don't want your prospects saying no. So instead, I would give them a question where they could answer, 9 times out of 10, they're going to answer yes. So when I say, so I would do my spiel for a minute, and I'd be like, hey, does that make sense? And that gives them an opportunity to be like, okay, yes, that makes sense. And then I would keep going. Or they would say, I'm just not interested. Click. And that's totally okay. At least it gives them, you don't want to force them to listen to you for 5 minutes when you can articulate within the first 60 seconds what your value proposition is and if it's really going to fit with what they do. Now, I'll be honest with you, but the majority of the time, they would not just say, no, click. This is what they would typically do. They would either say, yes, that makes sense, and they would want to listen more, or they would say, okay, yes, it makes sense, but the person that you really need to talk to is X. Because who knows why? It might be because you actually have the wrong person. It might be because sometimes if they're a producer, sometimes they have their account manager vet all this stuff. Sometimes like within an office, like within the Atlanta office, they may be like, hey, all of our vendors go through this one person before we do anything else. And so you're like, okay, well, I didn't know that. Who's that person? The person you really need to talk to is Sally or Greg or whoever. And that's helpful information. You say, okay, great. Okay, what's that person's name again? Okay, fantastic. Appreciate it. And then you can just call that main number and then ask to talk to, Sally or Greg, or you can figure out, I don't even ask for their contact information. If anything, I would just ask to clarify how their name is spelled so that I can spell their name right. And then I look them up on LinkedIn to confirm. And then that way I know then who the right person is to talk to in that office. But 9 times out of 10, they're going to either say, yes, it makes sense, and you keep going, or they're going to say, the person you really need to talk to is so-and-so. Like after that 5 minute or that first 60 seconds, like most of the time, unless you're just selling something that's of no utility whatsoever. And it's actually a good test. Like if you do, if you have 100, you talk to 100 people and 90% of them are like, I'm really not interested in this. Well, then the issue might be that you're just not addressing a pain point with your solution. So fine. So let's go into that 5-minute call in more detail. So sometimes you're, 1 time out of 20, you're actually going to get them on the phone. You're going to launch into your 1-minute spiel. But let's just say you've done your emails and you've got a time set up for next Thursday at 2. You call them at next Thursday at 2. Hey, this is Joe from XYZ Company. Is now an okay time for you? Yes. Okay, here's my 30 seconds to 1 minute about my thing. Bing. Okay, does that make sense? Yes. Okay, then you keep going. Okay. So again, you're not doing, tell me about your business, tell me about your customers, what pain points do they have? You do not do that. You go further in depth about your product, service, et cetera, and then you do that for then 2 more minutes. So you've done 1 minute break, and then you do 2 more minutes. And then after that 2 minutes, you stop there. And then again you ask, is that all making sense? Or you can say, do you have any questions about that? Again, I typically would say, does that all make sense? So that they could answer in the affirmative. Again, I want them saying yes as much as I can. Okay, and then the final 2 minutes are where I talk about how I use social proof or peer pressure, herd mentality, whatever you want to use. I use the final 2 minutes to talk about how brokers or account managers or producers or whoever it is you're talking to, how they use your service to specifically benefit them. And remember that the benefits of your service has to be sort of twofold benefits. It has to, or sometimes threefold benefits. It has to benefit the employer customer. And oftentimes by benefiting the employer customer, what you're really benefiting is the employee. So oftentimes you're talking about, okay, how is this going to benefit the employee? And how is this going to benefit the employer? And you've gone through that in your first 3 minutes. And now you're going to use social proof to talk about specifically how it's going to benefit the broker themselves. Be like, because of this, you're going to be, and the two major benefits that you're going to have for a broker is you're going to add value to their relationship with their customer such that the customer is going to be less likely to fire the broker, right? Because brokers hate losing groups. So to the extent that your solution is going to make that broker look smart and decrease their churn on their own book of business, that's a value to them. And then the other way that it's a value to them is to use as a prospecting tool. Like a lot of brokers then will use this solution as part of what they talk about with new groups. And then I would talk about, the other thing I would do is I would talk about which types of groups to use this for. And you don't want to say it's for all your kinds of groups. Is you want to have, and I'll talk about this in the next section, an ideal client profile. And so you're going to want to discuss what the ideal client profile looks like. So you could say, hey, look, for brokers in your situation, they apply this to these, and these types groups. And as a result of putting in this solution, it's going to benefit you personally by decreasing your churn of your clients. And it's going to give you a great prospecting opportunity when you bring in XYZ solution. Okay, so, and then what you need to do is you need to say at the end, again, I would use social proof for this, and I say what brokers typically do at this point in the call is, if you want to do a deep dive, then what I'd like to do is schedule a 30-minute call sometime in the next few weeks where we can go into more detail. Now, you want to schedule that right then and there if you can. And I will tell you that only about one time out of 10 will they say, yes, I'd like to do a deep dive on this. And you say, okay. And what you do is you then say, okay, pull up your Outlook calendar. Can you pull up your Outlook calendar now? And you try to get it on the schedule right then. Because going back and forth on schedule availability through email is just such a pain that a lot of people just give up. They're like, well, this is such a pain. I don't even want to bother doing this. So you want to ask them, are you sitting in front of your Outlook right now so you can pull up your calendar so we can actually set up a 30-minute time to talk in more detail? Sure, great. Okay, that's actually not going to happen the majority of the time, okay? So you can say that, and if you say that and like, well, could you just send me some information? You're like, sure. And so this is going to be the follow-up after that 5-minute call. You are going to send them email them a 1-page PDF that summarizes your business, value proposition, et cetera, et cetera. On that 1-page PDF, from a sales and marketing perspective, however you want to do it, if you yourself want to create it, if you actually have a marketing department that can do it, it cannot be more than 1 page. It cannot be less than 14-point font as its smallest font, okay? It needs to have sort of a newspaper layout where you're going to use 2 or 3 columns in that, and you're going to have blocks of text that are going to be surrounded by borders, and you're going to have some sections of text that are like different colors. So sometimes it'll be black text on a white background, and you might have another section that has yellow text on a black background or whatever. You're going to kind of break it up visually. You're going to want to have numbers, maybe several graphs or a pie chart in there. you're going to want to have a sort of, and you're going to want it to be bulleted. Okay, so this is not long paragraphs of prose. This is something that's going to have sort of sections that are underlined with bullets underneath, because it needs to be something that they can skim. You're not going to send them anything longer than one page on a PDF, because they will never read it. If you send them more than one PDF, they will never read it. If you send them a PDF that has more than one page, they will never read it. When you send them that follow-up email, you're going to say, look, I'm going to send you a follow-up email with a one-page PDF that summarizes our service, solution, business, etc. In that email that you send to them, you do not put a ton of information in the body of that email. Okay, you just type it in. You're like, hey Mary, hey Jimmy, great talking to you last Tuesday. Attached, you'll find the one-page PDF that we talked about. And then you have a call to action and that's it. You don't like rehash what your solution is or blah, 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 because you want that to all be in the PDF. You want to force them to open the PDF. If you put too much information in the body of the email, they'll get so exhausted reading the body of your email that they just be like, I don't want to bother, like you probably only have 30 seconds for them to actually look at your PDF. So you need to make your email very short. Now, again, you use social proof, peer pressure in that. You use the 30-minute call as the follow-up. Say, look, most brokers in your situation, after looking over that one pager, like to schedule a 30-minute deep dive on the solution. And again, you don't say, are you available? You say, you don't leave it open-ended. Let me know when you're available. You say, are you available next Tuesday at 4 p.m.? And you pick a specific date and time. And so in your own Outlook calendar, you need to block out tentative meetings of when you've sent out emails, blocking. So what I would do is I would have to do a lot of Outlook calendar work, because I would fill up my schedule with all of these meetings that I had proposed with people. And if I didn't hear back with them within 48 hours, then I would take it off, because if I didn't hear back with them in the 48 hours, then they probably were not going to follow up with me unless I followed up with them again. And if I did follow up with them again, they probably would not be available at that specific time that I had already mentioned. So I know I could take it off. So you're going to have that 5-minute call, and you're going to have a lot of drop off between the 5-minute call and sending that PDF and being able to schedule the 30-minute call. I mean, my rates of 30-minute calls after 5-minute calls were probably only 25% within, let's say, 2 months. Now, they might talk to you 6 months down the road, and what's so great is that after that 5-minute call, they'll totally remember you. Like, people don't remember emails at all, but like you'll be shocked. Like that 5-minute call, at least 50% of the time, it'll actually be 10 to 15 minutes, because they'll ask you questions and it'll turn it into a dialogue. Like, they'll give you more than 5 minutes. All you're asking for is 5, but they'll give you 10 to 15. And then a lot of people, just because they're busy, it's not because they're not interested in your solution, but they're just busy and you just haven't caught them at the right time. The timing is super important. And I would say the majority of the times that I was able to then schedule 30-minute meetings and in-person meetings and calls with the customer and the broker together is when there was a specific complaint or pain point that a customer brought up after they met with the broker. So that is what you're doing, is you're sending out a net to these brokers, trying to find brokers that have specific groups that are giving them a hard time right now. So what's really going to light up, there are some brokers that are quote unquote proactive. I mean, you'd love that everybody would be that way. But really, the best thing is when they have a specific client who's giving them a hard time about something and they need a solution for it. And you happen to be the solution for that. Now, you can never know a priori who that is, which is why you have to send out so many emails and so many voicemails so that you can just happen to luck out and get a broker that just happens to have a client that's giving them a hard time about the specific solution that you provide. Okay, so it's a numbers game. So you just have to knock on a ton of doors in order to go, from 100, emails down to, 10 5-minute conversations down to one 30-minute conversation. I mean, if it's that broad of a funnel, just down to one 30-minute conversation, so be it. So there you have a ratio, 100 to 10 to 1 30-minute conversation. Okay. And we would label those in Salesforce. We would call them 5-minute conversations and 30-minute conversations. And those were like the sort of gates in the sales cycle, where if we'd gotten you across that gate, if you will, or past that point. So if you need 2 30-minute phone calls, the best way to get 2 30-minute phone calls is not to try to increase and try to get two of the 5 to get 2 30-minute phone calls out of the 10 phone calls. The best way is not to get 20 phone calls out of the 100 emails that people that you're contacting. The best way to get 2 30-minute phone calls is to, at the very top of the funnel, contact 200 people, which will then trickle down to 25-minute calls, which will then trickle down to 2 30-minute calls. So anytime you're having a problem with production lower in the funnel, the best way, and this is an Aaron Ross thing. I have read this, and this was true in my experience as well, that the way that you handle that problem with the bottom of the funnel or the middle of the funnel is to broaden the top of the funnel rather than trying to do anything else. So that's why, I worked so hard to get 10,000 names, and believe me, we did not stay at 10,000. We got well beyond 10,000. We got well past 50,000. So, okay, so fine. So you've got that one-page PDF that you're gonna send as a follow-up. Okay, components of that one-page PDF. You summarize your business in one sentence at the top. You specifically talk about the pain problem of the clients that you're going to address with one sentence at the top. You need to then explain how you do it. So everyone talks, don't worry, you will get 2 results, right? Everyone talks about, don't talk about the features, talk about the benefits. But you have to explain how you do it, right? You can't not explain it, because, you'll be like, and when you talk, how you do that. And again, it's not lower healthcare cost. It's not improve healthcare quality. It is something very specific. It is, we are going to reduce your fraudulent claims, specifically in musculoskeletal, by orthopedists and neurosurgeons. We are going to decrease the long-term inpatient substance abuse claims in your plan by doing early intervention, telephonic and outpatient counseling for substance abuse for your employees. I mean, we are going to, offer a targeted surgical network for hip and knee replacements only for employees that want to travel less than 50 miles from their home, right? So those are like very specific things that pain points that you're going to address to them. None of this, don't even put a number around the percentage, because nobody believes those numbers in terms of healthcare costs. So it doesn't matter if you say 5% or 50%, like no one's going to believe it. What is credible, what is believable, if you talk about a very concrete, specific, detailed problem that you are going to address, and you're going to explain how you are going to do that. Because it can't be, we've got a magic wand, or we've got some sort of like proprietary solution. I mean, yes, you probably do have some sort of proprietary, but you have to describe it in some way, shape, or form. Otherwise, you have no credibility. And then you're going to talk about the benefits, and you're going to say, okay, well, what is the employer going to see as a result of this? Okay, so fine, you've got those segments. And then you're going to you're going to have a little box around the ideal client profile for clients that are municipalities, for clients that are manufacturers with greater than 200 employees in one location, blah, blah, for solely self-funded employers, for employers 50 to 500, however you want to break it down. You're going to specifically address the ideal client profile. You're also going to have a very small bulleted case study, and it can be an employer level case study, or it could just be an individual employee level case study about the substance abuse or the small carve out joint replacement network, whatever it is. You're going to put in a very small bulleted case study so that it's not just some sort of like abstract thing, that they can actually see like how it's going to be used. Okay. And then we also did some risk addressing in that initial sheet as well, where we would talk about, or company history, if you will. We would talk about our number of clients. We would talk about how long we have been in operation. We had talked about maybe the number of solutions you had performed, or there'd be like the number of hip or knee surgeries that you had been involved in. And then, we even talked about, insurance information, liability insurance information available on request, because a lot of times they would want to know that the vendor themselves had insurance coverage, errors and omissions, et cetera, et cetera. A lot of times they like some sort of IT or technology or information security insurance. It's called cyber insurance coverage as well, because a lot of these are technology solutions. Okay, so that one pager, you're not going to get it right the first time, but that thing is super important. Because what happens is that's going to get passed around the brokerage or potentially even nationwide without you knowing. So it needs to be able to stand on its own. And we would get compliments on ours. They'd be like, that one pager you said, that was really good. And again, the key is that we didn't try to put too much on there. Again, 14-point font at the smallest, lots of white space, use of color, blocking it up, make it super easy to read. And you cannot do multiple pages. It has to be one. Okay, so it takes a lot of discipline to do that. And frankly, ours went through a ton of iterations over probably a 2-year period of time to really perfect it. But that is, if there is collateral that you need to get right, that is the piece of collateral you need to get right. Okay, so fine. Now you talk about the 30-minute presentation. The 30-minute presentation is your quote-unquote slide deck. Here's the key to that slide deck, is that you're not shooting for an hour. Don't ask anybody for an hour WebEx or Zoom call. That is way too much time. You're only going to ask for 30 minutes. Your presentation should only be 20 minutes. If you can't fully articulate your business in 20 minutes in more detail, yes, of course you have an hour-long version of your story, but you're not going to go from 5 minutes to the hour-long version of your story. You're going to go from the 5-minute version of your story to the 20-minute version of your story. And they're going to ask you, if they're interested, they're going to ask you questions along the way. And so, you want them to do that. You want them to interrupt you. You want to jump around your slides, okay? So, one, I wouldn't even do Zoom, okay, or WebEx, right? Because you never know. Honestly, people have technological problems for the dumbest reasons. Sometimes they have so many windows open on their computer, they just can't find the window that has your webinar on it because they got so many windows open. So, or they got their cap locks on, or they just keep, hitting the 6 instead of the 7. You don't even want to deal with that. All you want to do is you want to give them a conference number to call or a phone number, right? Oftentimes they'll want to maybe conference in somebody or whatever. So you give them a conference call number, and then you email them the slide deck in PDF. And I wouldn't send it to them in PowerPoint because the file size can be too big. The file size cannot be over 10 megabytes because oftentimes the email server of the brokerage blocks emails that are larger than 10 megs. So you don't want to make it larger than 10 megs. And if you make it a PDF, it makes it a smaller file. So you want to have really no more than 20 slides in PowerPoint. You then convert that to a PDF, and then you email that. And then you say, hey, and I would typically email it to them on the day of the call, so that when we get on the call, I'll be like, hey, I emailed you this morning the slides that we're going to talk through. And going back into, don't send it to them any earlier than the day of, because talking to them that day is perfectly reasonable. But if you talk to them, if you send it to them the day before, it's going to get lost. Or if you send it to them any earlier, it's totally going to get lost. So just send it to them the day of. And that way, a lot of times, I would have folks that would flip through it, and then they would be in the car talking on their phone while we had our 30-minute call. And it was awesome. It worked out great because I could talk through the slides, and they could kind of from memory go through the slides in their head because they flipped through them real quick, and they were doing it while they were driving. So many brokers and account managers spend so much time in their cars that if you can actually make use of their time while they're driving, then that's great, which they can't do if it's Zoom or WebEx or GoToMeeting or whatever. So that's sort of, and that makes it, and that dumbs it down from a technology perspective, that very few people screw that up. So you want to create as little friction as possible when you are doing that 30-minute, more of a deep dive on your solution. Okay, fine. The next call to action after that is you give them a menu of options. And that's why I say, look, a lot of brokers in your situation, they like, you want to have some sort of assessment or proposal that you could do that is group specific. And a lot of times they're like, well, we need, if we could just get some client data. Okay, here's the key with that. I'm okay with you getting client data. You have to make your initial opportunity assessment, is what a lot of people called it. That's what we called it. You have to make your initial opportunity assessment capable of being flexible and capable of being created off of whatever reporting they can give you. If you have some long standard data set with specific data fields that you quote unquote have to have for your opportunity assessment, it's going to take the broker forever to get it, and you're never going to get it. You're going to slow down your sales cycle. Don't do that. We found that we sped up our sales cycle so much, and even if your opportunity assessment is only half as good as it could be, if you had better data, forget it. Don't worry about that. Just ask for, look, we'll just take whatever existing reporting you have, just send it over, and we'll create our opportunity assessment. We just say, look, we've got various levels of detail in our opportunity assessments. You just send us whatever reporting is easiest for you to send over, and we'll create an opportunity assessment based on that reporting. Okay? And that's awesome, because almost all brokers or account managers have some sort of existing reporting that they have from their carrier, their PBM, whoever it is, if you're doing workers' comp, whoever it's coming from, they're going to have some type of standard reporting, and you just want to get that. That's all you want. And then whether it's your IT team or your analytics team or whoever you're using to actually produce the opportunity reports, then you as a salesperson or as a sales team, you need to sit down with them and come up with sort of various levels of detailed opportunity assessments. And you basically, and just know that like 2/3 of the time, you're going to do a dumbed down opportunity assessment. And that is totally okay, because if they oftentimes they only want the opportunity assessment because then when they go and talk to the client about the solution, then the broker can say, look, and we already ran this against your data, and the group will be like, oh, that's awesome, because the next step that you really want to get to is a conference call or in-person meeting, depending upon where we are with the pandemic. You're going to get to a conference call or in-person meeting with the broker and the group together. Again, you're only asking for 30 minutes. And in that 30 minutes, you're essentially just going to go through your slide deck again. And to the extent that you have a PowerPoint presentation, you're going to go through that, that you have an opportunity assessment, you're going to go through that too. Again, you do not ask for an hour, only ask for 30 minutes. Could you get it asked for an hour, and could you sometimes get it? Of course, but you're going to be much more broker friendly and much more customer friendly if you can focus it down to 30 minutes. Now, obviously, to get it down to 30 minutes, you have to be succinct and you have to practice, and you absolutely need to practice this out loud. Record yourself on video, just through the webcam that you have. You need to be able to time yourself and get through it within those 30 minutes. And with that, I will pause for this episode 3 of How to Sell in Healthcare podcast. And thank you so much for listening. And I hope you have a great rest of your day. Bye now.